Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of The Paranormal Path, a place where we'll get together every week or so to discuss all things paranormal. We'll talk about ghosts and hauntings and Bigfoot, conspiracy theories, and anything else that comes our way. We'll be back in a minute to get things started.
Hi, this is Sam. You're listening to The Paranormal Path, hosted by my dad, Alan Mills.
Oh, welcome back, everybody. For our first time together, I thought that we would share true trucker ghost stories. I spent the better part of 35 years driving tractor trailers, and I've seen many strange things out there on the highway late at night. The first story is called The Guardian Angel. In the late 80s, Michigan had I-94 west of Detroit all torn up as they were completely replacing the roadbed. I was going into Detroit at about 2 a.m., driving in the construction zone, when I saw this heavy-set elderly lady in a raincoat standing behind her car in the construction zone, waving her arms for me to stop. I had almost passed the elderly lady when I saw her and couldn't stop. So I turned around and at the next exit and circled back and pulled up behind the broken down car with my four-ways on. Two heads popped up from behind the seats and a young guy came back to the truck. I told him to get everyone out of the car and I would take them to the gas station where they could get some help. He got his wife from the car and they got into my truck and shut the passenger door. I looked at them and said, "Is that everybody? Where's the elderly lady?" The couple looked puzzled and asked what I was talking about. So I told them the story of the elderly lady flagging me down and described her to the couple. Immediately, the woman burst into tears and said that she had heard that guardian angels looked like deceased relatives. She went on to explain that her grandmother had passed away earlier that year, and I had just described her grandmother to a T. This story still gives me goosebumps thinking about it all these years later. I can't wait to meet that elderly lady someday. I did something right that night for once in my life. The next story is entitled Knock Knock. Last week, I had just left Gallup, New Mexico, and was driving west on I-40 near Holbrook, Arizona, when I heard a knock, knock, knock 2 times on the side of my sleeper. It was very loud and distinct, like 1, 2, 3, and then it repeated once more shortly after that. I had the radio off and was alone in the rig. Honestly, I kept driving. What was the best thing to do? When I got to Holbrook, I stopped for a break but was too freaked out to get out and go look. The next day, I walked around the cab and was looking at the catwalk. There is no way a human being could have been riding back there at 3 a.m. in 10-degree freezing winter weather, going 70 miles an hour without anyone noticing. I logged this one as unexplained. Our next story is entitled Ghost Rider. I was driving to work around 3:30 in the morning on a back road in Mississippi near the Louisiana line. I was probably going about 35 or so, as it was raining in the winding road with no lines or anything. It's dangerous enough in daylight under normal conditions. Anyway, I'm driving along and suddenly this jet black horse just flies out of the woods on a side trail. There was a rider decked out in a black cloak with the hood and everything. The horse must have been blasting at full speed, and the rider's cloak was just whipping in the wind. They must have ran for a quarter mile or so and then darted off down another side trail and disappeared into the darkness. A buddy of mine was riding with me, and I looked over at him, and he looked over at me, and we both said something along the lines of, "Did you fucking see that?" yes, welcome back. Our last story in this segment is called A Child Cries. I was driving at night when I heard an odd grinding noise, like I had run over something that got stuck. It was about 2 a.m., so I pulled into a well-lit rest stop and woke up my buddy. I explained it to him, and as we got out of the car, we heard what sounded like a kid crying. There were no other cars at the rest stop, but we frequently heard stories about child trafficking and kidnapping, so we decided to check it out. We grabbed our flashlights and headed towards the noise, which was coming from the bathrooms. As we got closer, we realized it was coming from the woman's bathroom. It was a low, dull sobbing. We prepared for the worst and walked in expecting to see a brutally beaten or raped 8-year-old or something. But there was nobody inside. The sound was still there. It was still clearly coming from the bathroom. But the room was empty. We turned on the lights but still found nothing. We checked each stall, the trash can, nothing. We even started looking for where in the room it was coming from. Nothing. We wondered, is it a hidden speaker? Are we on candid camera? What the fuck? My buddy climbed up one of the stalls to get to the top window in the rest stop, which was vented out and open. He closed it and the noise stopped completely. He opened it and there was no more noise. We sat there for a few seconds staring at each other. He shrugged. Then the window slammed shut again without him touching it. We were out of that fucking bathroom in seconds. The noise started up about 10 seconds later, and we tore out of the parking lot. The grinding noise was still there, so this time I pulled over a few miles later at a Flying J truck stop, one that was well lit and occupied. We checked and saw a red and silver piece of metal wedged underneath my car. We couldn't remove it by hand as it was really wedged in there, so we kicked at the metal to bend it and figured we'd remove it when we got back. A week later, I had my mechanic take it out when he was doing a service. It was part of a kid's tricycle, the red area where somebody can stand. That was one of those moments for me, totally fucked up and crazy. Up next, from the folks at cdllife.com, come the 7 creepiest trucker urban legends. 3 things that are true about almost all truck drivers. They see some crazy stuff out on the road, which I have. They like to tell stories, which I'm doing. And sometimes those stories become larger than life. Number 1, the Black Dog. This pervasive urban trucking legend was popularized by the Patrick Swayze movie of the same name. Almost everyone in trucking has heard about the black dog that appears when a trucker starts to fall asleep. The black dog is supposed to be an omen. That means a fatal crash is coming. Some see the black dog as a warning to get off the road, but others say it means you're at the end of the line. Number 2. The Crushed Beetle. This particularly nasty urban legend involves one 18-wheeler rear-ending another at high speeds, basically fusing the trucks together. Days later, at the junkyard, people start to notice a foul smell. When they pry the trucks apart, they find a crushed Volkswagen Beetle with its occupants still inside. While this legend hasn't been confirmed, similar accidents do happen. Number 3, high beams. In this urban legend, a female driver is followed late at night by a trucker who keeps following her while flashing his high beams. The woman becomes more and more frightened as the trucker follows her through every stoplight, through every turn. Terrified, the woman pulls into a gas station and runs inside. The trucker follows her in, explaining there was a knife-wielding murderer in her back seat. Every time the psycho lifted his knife to stab the woman, the trucker flashed his lights and he crouched back down in his seat. Number 4, secret underground tunnel cities. This urban legend suggests that there are truck drivers who roll hundreds of miles through highway tunnels to provide supplies. Everyone from the Illuminati to aliens are rumored to occupy these strange underground cities, according to urban myth. Number 5. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is one of the oldest trucking urban legends. This one simply won't go away. The story goes that a figure on the side of the road thumbs a ride from a truck driver. The hitchhiker rides, often in complete silence, for a period of time and then totally vanishes from the moving truck. Number 6. Highway 666. Originally the 6th branch of US Route 66. This road has since been renamed US 491 because of a combination of public outcry over the satanic connotation and the fact that the highway signs keep getting stolen. There have been reports of demon dogs, flaming phantom trucks, and a ghostly girl on what many truckers call the Devil's Highway. And number 7, the Mystery Convoy. Stories of strange convoys are a staple in trucking urban legends. The video below captures a 124 truck convoy on I-64 last October, so strange that motorists filming ask if they are in the Twilight Zone. Check it out on YouTube, The Mystery Convoy. Okay, for our final story of the night, I think we got a good one. I am an over-the-road truck driver, and I drive across all of the lower 48 states. I see some unusual things from time to time, but nothing compares to what I encountered in Palestine, Arkansas, in mid-June of 2011. I was on a long haul from Detroit, Michigan to Houston, Texas. This was day 3 of my trip, and I was beginning to run out of driving hours for the day. I noticed a truck stop gas station sign on the side of I-40, pulled off, and decided to call it a night. I was running ahead of schedule, so I was going to save myself a long 14-hour break instead of the usual 10. Off the bat, I didn't like the area, but had no other choice. The bathrooms were unkempt and had enough graffiti on the walls to classify itself as an inner-city truck stop. Even though I was practically in the middle of nowhere, it was also a small stop, with parking for only a dozen trucks. After washing up, I purchased a new work knife, some hot food, and headed out to my truck. I sat in the captain's chair and listened to the radio while I ate my dinner with the windows down, letting in the dry wind. The Mississippi River had just begun flooding, but there hadn't been any rain in over a week. The surrounding area was beginning to look like Nevada more than Arkansas. I finished my meal and cleaned up a bit. I slid out of the seat and onto the pavement as a gust of warm wind hit me. I strolled over to the dumpster, tossed my garbage inside, and began slowly walking back to my truck. I fished out a filterless cigarette and leaned against the bug-splattered side of my truck and lit it with my lighter. I enjoyed the smoke as I watched the sun set below the horizon. A few more trucks had backed into spots. I spotted one guy walking out of the store with a bottle of beer in his hand, looking around nervously as he quickly strode over to his truck. The life of a trucker. Something interesting and new every day. Risking his job over one lousy beer. I climbed back into the cab of the truck, dropped back into the sleeper berth, changed into a pair of pajamas, and lay down to get some rest. I didn't bother setting an alarm. I felt sleep creep over me and accepted it as I drifted off into dream world. I awoke with the cab of the truck rocking violently, knocking the bottle of water I had placed on my nightstand over onto the floor. I sat straight up, fully awake, and pressed the button on the truck's radio alarm. It was shortly after 3 in the morning. I reached down and grabbed the bottle of water that had fallen, twisted the cap off, and took a few deep gulps before wondering what had rocked my truck so violently. Then I remembered the wind. I settled back down, got my heart rate back below 100, and laid my head down on the pillow. The truck rocked again, knocking my ashtray over that I had set in the cup holder, and once again tossing my water bottle on the floor. I flipped on the overhead light, slid on my shoes, and grabbed another cigarette from my pack. I opened the curtains, sat in the captain's chair, and shut off the sleeper light. I opened the door and noticed that it had cooled down considerably. I shut off the truck, pocketed the keys, and climbed down onto the pavement to look around. At this time of night, the truck stop only had lights around the gasoline pumps, and their light could not reach the truck parking area. I looked around a moment, lit my cigarette, and then noticed something. The wind had stopped blowing. I wondered what had caused my truck to rock so violently. Earthquake, maybe? I knew that a few had been reported around Memphis, and I was probably close enough to have felt a tremor, but that rocking motion did not feel like an earthquake. It felt like the wind hitting the side of my truck with a strong gust. Curiously and cautiously, I walked around the front of my truck to the passenger side and looked down the length of my trailer. I noticed movement, low to the ground, about 4 feet. Not fast. I used my keys to unlock the passenger side door, jumped up and grabbed my large flashlight from an overhead storage compartment. I climbed back down and closed and locked the door. I clicked on the light and shined it down the side of my trailer. There was a young girl standing off in the field about 10 feet behind my truck, but when I looked harder, she wasn't there. Well, like I said earlier, truck drivers see something new every day. This was certainly new. I began to walk toward the rear of my truck, scanning the field with my flashlight for any trace of the girl I had just seen. When I reached the back, there was no trace. It must have been a trick of the eyes. Heck, I haven't even fully awakened yet. I glanced over my shoulder. There were no cars at the pumps, and the clerk definitely hadn't noticed me. I felt the call of the wild coming on and didn't feel like walking into the bathroom and into the store wearing my pajamas. I was in the middle of nowhere and no one could see me, so I figured no harm, no foul. I stood at the rear of the trailer and did my business, looking around for that girl again, also hoping she wasn't hiding behind something and watching me do this. I put everything away and walked to the driver's side of my truck toward the cab. I took the last couple of puffs from my cigarette and flung it into the parking lot. Used my keys to unlock the truck and pop the door open. Just as I planted my foot on the fairing, I heard a distinct giggle. A girl's giggle. I stepped back down and shined the flashlight around. Nothing. "This is getting kind of creepy," I said aloud. "He heard me," a small girl's voice answered back. I jumped back away from my truck. The voice had come from inside the cab. Something was wrong. I had the entire truck locked up while I was walking around. There was no way that someone could have gotten in without breaking a window. Steeling myself for what was going to be an uncomfortable encounter, at the least, I took a step up on the fairing and leaned my head into the truck. "Is anyone in here?" I asked. I hit the switch to turn on the sleeper berth light. I climbed in. I put a knee onto the seat and peered into the sleeper berth. "Good night," a soft voice said, which seemed to emanate from all around me. I flinched as I heard the word and felt a cold chill run through my body. I slid off the seat and stood up in the cab, bumping my temple off the overhead storage bins. I looked around the sleeper. No one was there. I turned around and shuffled into the cab to close the door when I saw the young girl standing outside my truck on the pavement, looking at me with lifeless eyes. Those eyes, you see, weren't meant for a person. They were designed for a predator, and all of a sudden, I felt like prey. I reached forward and slammed the door shut and flicked the lock. I quickly decided I was not staying here the rest of the night. I turned the key and heard my truck's motor rumble to life, along with the familiar, annoying buzzing that was my air pressure gauge, telling me that I didn't have enough air to release the brakes. I took a furtive glance out the window, and there she stood, still as a tree, looking up at me and smiling. I didn't want to get any closer to the window until I was ready to get my truck moving. This was wrong, and I didn't want any part of this. The girl wasn't human. At least not anymore she wasn't. It was almost as if she was something so inhuman that it would take the form of a human. It's hard for me to explain, and I feel sick just thinking about it. I heard the siren shut off and hit the valves to supply air to my brake system. As the system began to air up, the siren came on again. Screw this, I thought to myself. I have enough to get out of here. I disengaged the clutch, grinded the truck into gear, and roared out of the parking lot like the devil himself was behind me, which for all I knew, he was. I looked in my mirror as I was about to start turning right and saw the girl washed in the red and amber glow of my running lights. She was smiling at me and waving. I flew through my gears as quickly as they would let me, and I got back on the interstate. Well, there you have it, folks, our first trip together down the paranormal path. This will be a work in progress, and since this was our first trip together, I'm always open to ideas and suggestions for content, maybe guests, or subject. Feel free to fire me an email at theparanormalpath@gmail.com. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.